Hello everyone, welcome to this second and final episode of Mark Antony's speech. Before diving into this speech, let's do a quick recap and try to recall what we learned in the previous episode. You will remember that I explained to you that in ancient Rome was a republic and not a monarchy. The most important political institution of the Republic of Rome was the Senate. Julius Caesar was a renowned military general, scholar, and politician. His growing fame, popularity, and power made him an object of envy to some of his rivals. The most prominent among his critics and enemies were Cassius, Casca, and Brutus. The conspirators, they banded together, they collaborated and assassinated Julius Caesar at the Senate on 15th of March 44 BCE. Please remember, 15th of March is referred to as Ides of March in the play. In the play, a soothsayer predicts that something terrible was going to happen to Julius Caesar on the Ides of March. I want you to remember this fact. Now, moving on. At Caesar's funeral, it was Brutus who explained to the people why they had to assassinate Caesar, why they had to murder Caesar. And he convinced the people that Caesar's death was for the good of Rome, that Rome was better off without Caesar. After that, it was Mark Antony who rose to speak. When Mark Antony began to speak, he realized that the crowd had turned hostile towards Caesar. He knew that he would have to tread very carefully in order to win the crowd back to his side. He began on a cautious note so as not to upset the conspirators. He began by calling the conspirators, Brutus and the co-conspirators, noble, and throughout the first half of his speech, he referred to them as noble time and again. He called Caesar his friend. He also said that Caesar was faithful and just to him. He mentioned that Caesar was executed on the pretext that Caesar was ambitious, but then he proceeded cautiously in order to refute the allegation leveled against Caesar by Brutus and the co-conspirators. First, he mentioned that during many of his military campaigns, Julius Caesar had taken many captives and he brought them to Rome. He was able to collect a lot of ransom from the captives, and all this money went to the exchequer of Rome, and the money was used for the well-being of the people of Rome. The money was not used by Caesar for his own benefit, so how could he be ambitious? Next, he mentioned that Caesar had a very tender heart. He was soft-hearted and compassionate towards the people of Rome. He often wept over the plight of the poor people. Now, Mark Antony's contention was that an ambitious man is usually self-centered and ruthless. He has no feelings for others. So, how could a man like Caesar, who was so tender-hearted, soft-hearted, and compassionate, be called an ambitious man? Next, he mentioned that at the festival of Lupercal, please remember here that in ancient Rome, Lupercal was an important festival. At the festival of Lupercal, Mark Antony had offered the crown to Caesar 3 times, and each time Caesar had turned down the offer. So if Caesar was really ambitious, he would have accepted the crown. Now, at this point, Mark Antony paused in his speech and said that his heart was in the coffin of Julius Caesar. He did it purposefully in order to draw the attention of the public. He wanted to evoke their emotions and sentiments. He also wanted to see what impact his words were having on the crowd. He watched with satisfaction that some members in the audience were whispering among themselves, and they were discussing that probably Mark Antony was right, that Caesar was not ambitious as suggested by Brutus and the co-conspirators. After that, Mark Antony resumed speaking, and once again he called Brutus and the co-conspirators noble. After that, he took out the most potent weapon in his armory. He played the trump card. He showed the crowd the will of Caesar with his seal, which he claimed to have found in his closet. He told the crowd that if they knew what was written in the will, their heart would explode with pity for Caesar, that they would be driven to grief over the death of Caesar, and they would scramble to dip their napkins in his precious blood, and that they would beg for a strand of Caesar's hair to be preserved as a memento. And later on, they would pass on those souvenirs to their children and grandchildren as precious family heirloom. But he mentioned very cleverly that he was not going to read out the will to the public. This was also a carefully devised strategy used by Mark Antony. Now, if I tell you, I have something very important for you and I have something very wonderful for you, and then I tell you I'm not going to reveal it to you, how will you feel? I'm sure you'll get more and more curious. This is precisely what Mark Antony did. He wanted to trigger the curiosity of the crowd. So he told them that he was not going to read out the will. He wanted to make them more and more curious. But then at this stage, the crowd began to call the conspirators villains, murderers, and traitors. They had forgotten that a short while ago they were calling Brutus and the co-conspirators noble. And then they began to appeal vociferously to Mark Antony to read out the will. But Mark Antony held them off and he asked them to get closer to Julius Caesar's coffin, and he asked them to form a circle around his coffin. This was also a clever ploy used by Mark Antony. This is because he wanted to show the Roman public how mercilessly and brutally Caesar was assassinated. So as they came closer and formed a ring around the coffin, Mark Antony began to describe in vivid detail how Caesar was stabbed mercilessly by the conspirators. He showed them the wounds, and then he mentioned the name of each of the conspirators and told the public where they had struck Julius Caesar. He mentioned the name of Casca, he mentioned the name of Cassius, and showed them where they had inflicted the wounds. But then he mentioned Brutus, and he also mentioned that the wound inflicted by Brutus was the cruelest of all. That was because Julius Caesar regarded Brutus as his dear friend, and he was devastated to see Brutus among the conspirators. Now here, Mark Antony wanted to paint Brutus as a traitor. He wanted to tell the public very cleverly that Brutus was no liberator, but he was a traitor. He had killed Julius Caesar in a treacherous way. He knew that Brutus was held in high respect by the people of Rome. They loved and trusted him. So he wanted to vilify Brutus so that his reputation would be tarnished and he would be able to turn the mood of the crowd in his favor and against the conspirators. When the crowd saw the mutilated body of Caesar, they were filled with pity, and then they were filled with anger. Their anger was palpable. They were simmering with anger, and they started clamoring for revenge. They wanted to leave the place, but then at this stage, Mark Antony told the crowd that he wished he had the power of speech like Brutus. Then he'd be able to instigate them and incite them into a rebellion, a mutiny. At this point, the crowd was about to explode with anger, and they threatened to burn down the house of Brutus. They called Brutus and the co-conspirators villains, murderers, and traitors. But Brutus, I beg your pardon, Mark Antony restrained them, saying that they should stay back and hear what was written in the will. The crowd was so inflamed, they were so incensed, and they were so angry that they wanted to leave the place and find out the conspirators. They had already forgotten about the will. So what Mark Antony did, he held them back and then he started reading out the provisions in Caesar's will. he told them that Caesar had left 75 drachmas to each of the Roman citizens. Now, drachmas were silver coins used in ancient Rome. 75 drachmas in ancient Rome was a considerable amount of money. In addition to that, Caesar had left his walks, private walks, and arbors and orchards for the use of the general people. So when the people learned what Caesar had left for them in his will, they were filled with fury. They realized that Caesar was generous and magnanimous and not ambitious as suggested by Brutus and co-conspirators. They turned violent and went berserk. They went about looking for the conspirators, and they started destroying public property and torching public property. At this point, Mark Antony, he stepped back and watched the mob going berserk. He watched with huge satisfaction the mayhem unleashed by the frenzied mob. And that's how Act 3 comes to an end. Now, if you want to know what happened to Brutus and Cassius eventually, then you'll have to read the summary provided in Act 4 and 5 in your textbook. I strongly recommend that you read the summary provided in your book so that you have a comprehensive view of the play. Now, before I wrap it up, I would like to tell you once again that Mark Antony used his power of rhetoric in order to win the hearts and minds of the people. He appealed to their emotions and sentiments in order to turn the crowd in his favor. You should also note here carefully that the mindset and the psychology of a mob. The mob is usually fickle-minded, it is impatient and irrational. And this fact has been emphasized by Shakespeare in the play. Mark Antony had a keen insight into mob psychology, and he exploited it to his advantage. Mark Antony's speech is a brilliant display of oratory, and it is widely regarded as a masterpiece. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope this explanation will prove useful to you. So take care of yourself, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye for now.